Before we begin, thank you for spending part of your day with me. Whether you're listening from home, work, while traveling, or relaxing before bed, I'm truly grateful you're here. Tonight's story is about sacrifice that goes unnoticed, loyalty tested by misunderstanding, and how the strongest people are often the quietest. Please like, share, and subscribe, and comment below where you're watching from so I can see just how far across the world this story has reached. Now, let's begin today's unforgettable story. The rain hammered against the 40th floor windows like 1,000 desperate fingers begging for entry. Inside Milan's most secure corporate headquarters, 63 monitors cast pale blue light across a woman's motionless face. Her dark chestnut hair had escaped its neat ponytail hours ago. Her hazel eyes, usually sharp enough to catch a single anomalous data packet among billions, had finally surrendered to exhaustion. Alessandra Fiorini's cheek rested against her keyboard. For the first time in 48 hours, she slept. The elevator chimed. Severino D'Aquila stepped onto the operations floor at 3:47 a.m., his steel-gray eyes scanning the darkness. His black Italian suit remained immaculate despite the late hour. The tattoo on his neck, Il Controllo Inizia con la fiducia, caught the monitor light as he turned toward the only occupied workstation. He stopped. His jaw tightened. Without a word, he crossed the floor. His hand reached down and removed her security badge from its lanyard. He placed a single sheet of paper beside her keyboard. "People who sleep while my empire is under attack," he said quietly, "don't belong here." Her eyes opened. She saw his broad shoulders already turning away. She saw the termination letter. She saw 48 hours of desperate, invisible warfare reduced to a single moment of perceived failure. "I already stopped the first attack," she whispered, but Severino D'Aquila was already gone. Alessandra gathered her laptop. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from bone-deep exhaustion. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She simply walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and disappeared into the rain-soaked Milan night. Exactly 3 hours later, at 6:47 a.m., every screen inside the D'Aquila headquarters went black. 48 hours earlier, the morning had begun like any other. Alessandra arrived at 7:15 a.m., carrying a simple leather bag containing her personal laptop, 3 encrypted hard drives, and a thermos of espresso strong enough to dissolve steel. The security guard at the lobby desk, a retired carabinier named Tommaso, waved her through with a familiar nod. "Early again, Dottoressa Fiorini." "The servers don't sleep, Tommaso." "Neither do you, from what I can tell." She smiled, but the expression didn't reach her eyes. Something had been bothering her for 3 days now. Small anomalies in the network traffic. Microsecond delays in authentication protocols. Patterns that shouldn't exist in a system she had personally rebuilt from scratch 18 months ago. The D'Aquila organization operated behind the facade of legitimate businesses, import-export companies, luxury real estate development, a chain of high-end restaurants, and a private investment firm managing over 4 billion euros in assets. Beneath that respectable surface lay one of Italy's oldest and most powerful mafia families. Their influence stretching from Milan to Rome to international interests she wasn't supposed to know about. Alessandra knew about all of it. That was why they had hired her. Riccardo Benassi, the organization's cyber intelligence director, had recruited her personally 3 years ago from a prestigious cybersecurity firm in Zurich. He had recognized what others had missed, that behind her quiet demeanor and modest wardrobe lay one of the most brilliant minds in European digital security. She had written her doctoral thesis on predictive threat analysis. She held patents for encryption protocols used by 3 different governments. And she had, on 4 separate occasions, been approached by intelligence agencies who wanted her skills for purposes she couldn't morally justify. Riccardo had offered her something different. "The D'Aquila family has enemies," he had said during that first meeting in a Geneva cafe. "Enemies who would destroy innocent people to hurt them. Children, elderly parents, employees who know nothing about the family's true business. I need someone who can protect those people without asking too many questions about everything else." She had asked only one question. "Can I draw my own ethical lines?" "You can," he had answered. And if those lines are ever crossed, you walk away with my blessing and a generous severance. For 3 years, those lines had held. Now, sitting at her workstation on the 40th floor, Alessandra stared at a pattern that made her blood run cold. Someone was inside the network. Not obviously. Not clumsily. Whoever had breached their outer defenses had done so with surgical precision, hiding their presence in the digital equivalent of a perfectly forged passport. The intrusion was so sophisticated that their standard security systems hadn't even registered an alert. But Alessandra had noticed. She always noticed. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up logs from the past 72 hours. The pattern became clearer and more terrifying. The intruders weren't stealing data. Not yet. They were mapping, learning, building a complete blueprint of the organization's digital infrastructure, preparing for something much larger. "Ricardo," she said into her phone, keeping her voice carefully controlled. "I need you up here. Now." 20 minutes later, Ricardo Benassi stood behind her chair, his weathered face pale beneath his silver beard. "How long have they been inside?" "Based on these signatures, at least 6 weeks. Maybe longer." 6 weeks. His hand gripped the back of her chair. "That's impossible. We run penetration tests monthly. Nothing came up. Because they wanted nothing to come up." Alessandra pulled up another screen, showing a cascade of falsified security reports. "They've been feeding our monitoring systems clean data while operating underneath. It's like someone put a perfect photograph over our security cameras while they robbed the vault." "Can you trace them?" "I can try. But the moment I start actively hunting, they'll know. And if they know, they'll accelerate whatever they're planning." Ricardo's hand moved to his forehead. In 25 years of intelligence work, first for the Italian government, then for private sector clients, and finally for the D'Aquila family, he had never seen anything like this. "What do you recommend?" Alessandra turned to face him. The morning light caught the determination in her hazel eyes. "I go hunting anyway. I identify every backdoor they've installed, every piece of code they've planted, every vulnerability they're planning to exploit. Then I close them all at once, before they have time to react." "How long will that take?" "I don't know. Days probably. I'll need to go dark. No contact with the rest of the organization, no regular work patterns that might tip them off. Just me and the code." "What about the senior leadership? Shouldn't we inform?" "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "The more people who know, the higher the risk of leak. And honestly, Ricardo, I'm not sure this breach came from outside alone. The level of access they have, the knowledge of our specific architecture, someone inside might be helping them." The words hung in the air between them. Someone inside. In an organization where loyalty was literally tattooed into skin, the idea of betrayal was almost unthinkable. Almost. "I'll keep this between us," Ricardo said finally. "You do what you need to do. I'll cover your regular responsibilities." "Thank you." He paused at the door. "Alessandra, be careful. If you're right about an inside source, that makes you a target the moment you start pushing back." She nodded, already turning back to her screens. She didn't mention that she had been a target the moment she first noticed the anomalies. She didn't mention that her personal laptop, the one she never connected to the organization's network, had received an anonymous message 3 days ago. Just 6 words. "Stop looking," or "stop breathing." For the next 14 hours, Alessandra Fiorini ceased to exist as a person and became something closer to a machine. She worked through lunch. She worked through dinner. She worked through the evening shift change, barely noticing when the other cybersecurity analysts packed up their things and headed home. She worked through the quiet hours after midnight, sustained by espresso and the electric clarity that came from operating at the absolute edge of her capabilities. The enemy, because that's what they were, an enemy, had built something beautiful and terrible inside the D'Aquila network. 17 separate backdoors, each one hidden inside legitimate code like a pearl growing around a piece of sand. For dormant programs designed to activate simultaneously and begin extracting data at a rate of 3 terabytes per minute. A complete copy of the organization's financial database, including accounts that existed in no official record, waiting to be transmitted to an external server the moment someone pressed a button. And underneath all of it, the crown jewel of their operation, a list, names and addresses of every person under D'Aquila protection. Family members, witnesses, former associates living under new identities, children, 347 people whose lives depended on that information never reaching the wrong hands. Alessandra stared at the list, and for the first time in hours, she felt something beyond the cold focus of the hunt. She felt rage. Whoever had built this wasn't just trying to steal money or embarrass the D'Aquila family. They were building a weapon of mass destruction. A single data leak could trigger a cascade of violence that would leave dozens dead and destroy an organization that, whatever its moral complexities, protected hundreds of innocent people. She couldn't let that happen. At 3:47 a.m., 24 hours after she had first noticed the anomalies, Alessandra launched her counterattack. The digital war that followed would never make the news. No cameras recorded it. No journalists documented it. The outside world continued to sleep, dream, and wake without any awareness that billions of euros and hundreds of lives hung in the balance. But inside the 40th floor operations center, a woman with exhausted eyes and determination hardened into diamond waged the most important battle of her career. The enemy noticed her immediately. The moment she began closing back doors, they began opening new ones. The moment she quarantined malicious code, they deployed countermeasures designed to crash her containment protocols. The moment she thought she had isolated their access point, she discovered 3 more she had missed. They were good. They were very, very good. But so was she. For 12 hours, the battle raged across invisible lines of code. Alessandra's fingers cramped. Her eyes burned. At one point, she realized she had been holding her breath for so long that spots danced at the edges of her vision. She didn't stop. At 2:15 p.m. on the second day, she made a breakthrough. The enemy had been routing their attacks through a series of compromised servers, legitimate companies whose security had been secretly breached to provide cover for the operation. By tracing the precise timing of their responses, Alessandra was able to identify their primary command and control server. It was located in a data center in Switzerland. More importantly, it required a specific authentication token to maintain its connection to the D'Aquila network. Without that token, the enemy would be locked out. Finding that token took another 6 hours. But at 8:43 p.m., she found it. Hidden inside a piece of code that appeared to be a standard maintenance script, the authentication token pulsed like a malignant heart. Destroying it wouldn't just lock out the attackers. It would corrupt every piece of malicious code they had planted, rendering their weeks of preparation worthless. Alessandra positioned her cursor over the delete command. One click and the immediate threat would end. But one click would also destroy her best chance of tracing the attack back to its source. One click would protect the D'Aquila family, but it wouldn't identify the traitor who had helped the enemy get inside. She hesitated. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against every instinct, she answered. "You're better than we expected." The voice was male, cultured, speaking Italian with a slight accent she couldn't place. "We've been watching you work. Impressive, truly." "Who is this?" A soft laugh. "Someone who appreciates talent. Someone who could offer you much more than the D'Aquila family ever will." "I'm not interested. You haven't heard the offer." "I don't need to." A pause. When the voice returned, it had lost its cultured warmth. "Then hear this instead. You delete that token and we switch targets. Not the financial databases. Not the business records. The list." Her blood froze. 347 people. Dottoressa Fiorini. "We have copies stored off-network. Delete the token and by tomorrow morning, that list will be in the hands of every rival family, every law enforcement agency, and every journalist in Europe." "You're bluffing." "Am I? Do you really want to stake 347 lives on that assumption?" She didn't answer. "Here's what happens next," the voice continued. "You step away from your workstation. You go home. You forget everything you've seen. In return, we take what we came for. Money, nothing more, and everyone stays safe. And if I don't, then we burn it all down." The money, the data, and the list. Complete destruction. Your employers lose everything, and you get to live with the knowledge that you could have prevented it. The line went dead. Alessandra stared at her screen. The cursor still hovered over the delete command. Her hand trembled. What happened next would define everything that followed. Alessandra Fiorini made a choice. Not the safe choice. Not the easy choice. The right choice. She deleted the token. And then, in the 17 seconds before the enemy's systems recognized what she had done, she executed a trace protocol she had been secretly preparing for the past 6 hours. The protocol wasn't designed to identify the hackers. It was designed to identify their inside source. Data flooded her screen, connection logs, authentication records, access timestamps. Somewhere in that cascade of information lay the proof of who had betrayed the D'Aquila family. But before she could analyze it, the enemy struck back. Every screen in the operations center erupted with cascading error messages. The lights flickered. Emergency alarms began screaming throughout the building as the enemy deployed their final weapon. Not a targeted attack, but a complete system meltdown designed to destroy as much data as possible before they lost access entirely. Alessandra's fingers moved faster than thought. Isolate the core servers. Reroute power to backup systems. Quarantine the administrative network. Protect the financial databases. Protect the protected witness list. Protect everything that mattered. For 97 minutes, she fought a battle that should have required a team of 20 specialists. She fought alone. At 11:52 p.m., the attack finally ended. The enemy had been expelled from the network. The financial databases were secure. The protected witness list remained confidential. And Alessandra Fiorini, who had been awake for 46 hours, who had consumed nothing but espresso and determination, who had single-handedly prevented what would have been the worst security breach in the organization's history, Alessandra Fiorini finally collapsed. Her head hit the keyboard. Her eyes closed. She slept. At 3:47 a.m., Severino D'Aquila stepped off the elevator. He had received a security alert about system fluctuations and had come personally to assess the situation. As the head of the family, he believed in maintaining direct oversight of every critical function. He trusted his people, but he trusted his own eyes more. What those eyes saw now was unacceptable. A woman asleep at her workstation. Emergency protocols clearly displayed on surrounding monitors. Evidence of a security incident that no one had bothered to report to him. And in the center of it all, an employee who apparently found the situation so unimportant that she had decided to take a nap. Severino's jaw tightened. The tattoo on his knuckles, Honore Forza, seemed to pulse with his rising anger as his hands clenched at his sides. He had built this organization on discipline, on excellence, on the understanding that weakness, any weakness, could be exploited by enemies who never slept, never stopped, never showed mercy. And here was weakness, sleeping peacefully, while his empire faced threats she apparently couldn't be bothered to address. He crossed the floor. He removed her badge. He placed the termination letter beside her keyboard. People who sleep while my empire is under attack, he said, don't belong here. Her eyes opened. He saw something in them, exhaustion, yes, but something else too. Something that looked almost like disappointment. Not in herself. In him. I already stopped the first attack, she whispered. But Severino was already walking away, and he didn't hear the second part of what she said. The part where she whispered, so quietly that only the empty room could hear. The second one starts in 3 hours. Alessandra walked through the rain to her apartment in Brera, a modest 2-bedroom flat she had chosen specifically for its proximity to public transportation and its complete lack of connection to her professional life. Her keys trembled in the lock. She didn't cry. She had stopped crying over professional disappointments years ago, when she had learned that the world rarely rewarded women who showed vulnerability. Instead, she made espresso. She sat at her kitchen table, and she reviewed the data she had managed to download before her termination. The trace protocol had worked. Somewhere in the information now stored on her personal laptop lay the identity of the D'Aquila traitor. The person who had given the enemy access. The person who had endangered 347 innocent lives. She should walk away. That was the smart thing to do. She had been fired. Her obligations to the organization had ended. Whatever happened next was someone else's problem. But those 347 names haunted her. Families, children, people who had committed no crimes, whose only mistake was being connected to someone connected to the D'Aquila family. She couldn't abandon them, not even for a boss who had fired her without asking a single question. So instead of sleeping, instead of resting her battered body and exhausted mind, Alessandra Fiorini opened her laptop and continued working, because in exactly 3 hours, the enemy's secondary attack would begin. And there was no one else who knew it was coming. Across Milan, in a penthouse suite overlooking the Duomo, Severino D'Aquila poured himself a whiskey and stared at the rain-streaked windows. His operations manager, Enzo Marchetti, stood near the doorway, his scarred face troubled. "You fired the cyber specialist?" "I dismissed a sleeping employee during a security incident, which apparently wasn't serious enough to keep her awake." Enzo shifted his weight. He was not a man given to questioning Severino's decisions. He had served the D'Aquila family for 23 years, since he was barely old enough to drive, but something about this situation bothered him. "Riccardo Benassi has been trying to reach you. Benassi can wait until morning. He said it was urgent. Something about the security incident." Severino's steel-gray eyes narrowed. The Roman lion tattooed on his right forearm seemed to ripple as he set down his whiskey glass. "What about it?" He didn't say, but he sounded worried. In 23 years, Enzo had never known Riccardo Benassi to sound worried about anything. The man had calmly directed operations during a federal raid that had lasted 6 hours. He had maintained perfect composure when a rival family had threatened his wife and children. He had earned his position precisely because nothing rattled him. "Call him back," Severino said. But before Enzo could reach for his phone, every light in the penthouse suddenly went dark. The whiskey glass shattered on the floor as Severino lunged for the emergency phone near his desk. Dead. His mobile phone showed no signal. The backup satellite communication system displayed nothing but static. And through the rain-streaked windows, Severino watched as the lights of Milan began going dark, block by block, spreading outward from a central point that he knew, even before Enzo confirmed it, was the D'Aquila headquarters. "Someone's attacking us," Enzo said, his hand moving instinctively toward the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. Severino's mind raced through the possibilities. A physical assault? No, the building security would have alerted him. A rival family making a move? They wouldn't have the capability to affect infrastructure across the city. Then what? And suddenly, unbidden, he heard her voice again. "I already stopped the first attack." The first attack. Not the only attack. The first one. The next 6 hours were the worst of Severino D'Aquila's professional life. Without digital communications, coordinating the organization's response became an exercise in controlled chaos. Enzo dispatched runners to key locations. Severino personally drove to the headquarters building, only to find every system completely inoperable. Riccardo Benassi met him in the lobby, his face the color of old paper. "We need to talk." "Start talking." "Not here." They moved to a secure conference room on the 23rd floor, one of the few that still had emergency battery power, and Riccardo laid out everything. The breach, the 48-hour battle, the protected witness list, the anonymous threat, Alessandra's decision to destroy the authentication token despite the blackmail, and the fact that she had been working alone, without rest, without recognition, without telling anyone else because she feared a traitor within the organization. By the time Riccardo finished, Severino's hands were gripping the edge of the conference table, so hard that his knuckles had turned white. The tattoo on his neck, "Il controllo inizia con la fiducia," suddenly felt like an accusation. Control begins with trust. He had controlled the situation without trusting anyone to give him accurate information. He had dismissed the one person who had been fighting to save his empire. And now, because of his judgment, that person was gone, and the enemy's secondary attack was tearing through systems she had spent 48 hours protecting. Where is she now? I don't know. She's not answering her phone. Find her. And then what? Severino met Ricardo's eyes. Then I apologize. And I ask her to save us. Alessandra watched the secondary attack unfold from her kitchen table. She had expected it. She had known, from the pattern of the enemy's initial intrusion, that they would have contingency plans. No operation this sophisticated would put all its resources into a single attack vector. But knowing and seeing were different things. On her screen, she watched the D'Aquila network collapse in real time. The enemy had learned from their first failure. This time, they weren't trying to steal data, they were trying to destroy it. Complete systemic annihilation. If they succeeded, the organization would lose decades of financial records, legal documents, and operational intelligence. More importantly, they would lose the protected witness list. Not to theft, to destruction. The enemy had apparently decided that if they couldn't have the information, they would make sure no one else could either, including the people who needed it to keep 347 innocent people safe. Alessandra's fingers hovered over her keyboard. She could stop this. She could connect to the D'Aquila network remotely. Her termination hadn't yet been processed through all the security systems, and deploy countermeasures that would neutralize the attack. But doing so would expose her. The enemy would know she was still fighting, and this time they would come for her directly. She thought about the anonymous message. Stop looking, or stop breathing. She thought about her small apartment, her quiet life, the years of sacrifice that had led her to this moment. And she thought about 347 names on a list. Families, children, people who would never know that their safety depended on a woman they had never met, making a choice in a kitchen they would never see. Alessandra Fiorini made her decision. She connected to the network, and she went to war. The counterattack was elegant. Instead of trying to stop the enemy directly, Alessandra created a maze. Every time they tried to access critical data, she redirected them to decoy systems filled with garbage information. Every time they tried to delete files, she moved the real files somewhere else and let them delete worthless copies. It was like watching a master chess player sacrifice pieces to protect her king. For 4 hours, she led them in circles. But she couldn't keep it up forever. The enemy had resources she didn't. More personnel, more processing power, more time. Eventually, they would realize what she was doing, and then they would simply overwhelm her defenses through brute force. She needed help, and she knew exactly where to find it. At 10:15 a.m., Riccardo Benassi received an encrypted message. The sender was anonymous, but the encryption key was one that only 2 people in the world possessed. I'm still fighting. They have an inside source. Proof is in the attached file. Come alone to the address below. AF. P.S. Tell your boss that the next time he fires someone, he might want to ask what they were doing first. Ricardo read the message 3 times. Then he did something he had never done in 25 years of intelligence work. He smiled. The address led to a small cafe in the Navigli district, the kind of place that served excellent espresso and asked no questions. Alessandra sat at a corner table, her laptop open, her face illuminated by the screen's pale glow. She looked terrible. Dark circles beneath her eyes, trembling hands, skin so pale it seemed translucent, and in her exhausted gaze, a fire that refused to go out. You look like hell, Ricardo said, sliding into the seat across from her. I've been keeping your organization from complete destruction. It's not great for the complexion. The boss wants to see you. The boss fired me. He wants to apologize. Alessandra laughed. A short, bitter sound. He can apologize all he wants. It doesn't change what he did. What did he do exactly? From his perspective. From his perspective, he saw a sleeping employee during a crisis. From my perspective, he saw exactly what he wanted to see. Proof that he was right to never trust anyone, that everyone who works for him is just waiting for a chance to fail. She met Ricardo's eyes. He didn't ask Ricardo. He didn't investigate. He just judged. You're right. I know I'm right. And he knows it too. That gave her pause. Severino D'Aquila doesn't admit he's wrong. It's not in his DNA. Maybe not. Ricardo leaned forward. But he does protect his people. And right now, you're the only person who can protect them. Whatever happened between you and him, whatever his failures, are you really willing to let 347 innocent people pay for his mistakes? The question hung in the air. Alessandra's jaw tightened. No, she finally said. I'm not. Then help us. She turned her laptop to face him. On the screen was a series of encrypted files. I traced the inside source. Someone with executive-level access has been funneling information to the enemy for at least 3 months. Financial records, security protocols, personnel files, everything they needed to build their attack. Who? She pulled up a photograph. Ricardo's face went pale. That's impossible. It's not impossible. It's evidence. And if we don't act fast, the evidence will disappear along with everything else. She closed the laptop. Take me to the boss. We need to end this. Severino's penthouse was in chaos when they arrived. Men with weapons, emergency communication equipment, maps of the city spread across every surface. And in the center of it all, a man who looked like he hadn't slept since the crisis began. Severino d'Aquila turned when Alessandra entered. Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Severino did something that silenced every person in the room. He apologized. I was wrong, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner. I judged without investigating. I condemned without understanding. And I dismissed the one person who was fighting hardest to protect everything I care about. He took a step toward her. The tattoo on his neck was visible above his open collar. The words seemed to pulse with new meaning. Il controllo inizia con la fiducia. Control begins with trust. I failed to trust, he continued. I failed to listen. And because of that failure, my organization, my family has suffered. That's on me. Not on you. Never on you. Alessandra held his gaze. Pretty words, she said. But words are easy. What are you going to do? Whatever you tell me to do. Another silence. Then Alessandra nodded. Good. Because we have about 6 hours before your network is completely destroyed. And before we can fix it, we have a traitor to catch. She opened her laptop. She pulled up the photograph. And every person in the room stopped breathing. Because staring back at them from the screen was a face they all knew. A face that had been trusted for decades. A face that now represented the ultimate betrayal. Marco Delacroix, Alessandra said. Your chief financial officer. He's been feeding information to an international cybercrime syndicate called the Vescovi Network for the past 3 months. The room erupted. Voices overlapped. Shock, denial, fury. Marco Delacroix had been with the family for 18 years. He had managed their legitimate business operations, navigated complex international regulations, attended christenings and funerals and family dinners. He was one of them. Proof, Severino said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Show me proof. Alessandra pulled up a cascade of data. Communication logs showing encrypted messages between Marco's personal devices and servers in Switzerland. Financial transfers from dummy corporations to accounts controlled by known cybercriminals. And most damning of all, a recorded conversation in which Marco calmly discussed the best time to launch the attack that was currently destroying the d'Aquila network. He's been planning this for over a year, Alessandra explained. The Vescovi network approached him 18 months ago. They offered him 10 million euros to provide inside access. He negotiated them up to 25. Why? Enzo demanded. His scarred face was twisted with fury. He had everything here. Money, respect, protection. Because he was passed over, Severino said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. 2 years ago, I chose someone else to manage our expansion into Eastern Europe. Marco wanted that position. He had prepared for it. He had expected it. Severino's steel-gray eyes were distant, seeing something in the past. I thought I was making the right decision for the organization. I never considered what it might cost us. So he sold us out for revenge? Enzo shook his head. That's insane. Revenge is just the beginning, Alessandra said. The Vescovi network isn't interested in money alone. They want to dismantle your entire operation. They want to expose your protected witnesses, destroy your financial infrastructure, and leave your family vulnerable to every enemy you've ever made. Who leads this network? A man named Adriano Vescovi. Former Italian intelligence went private about 10 years ago. He's brilliant, patient, and completely ruthless. He sees this operation as his masterpiece. The complete destruction of one of Italy's most powerful families, accomplished entirely through digital means. Severino absorbed this information. Then he asked the question that would determine everything that followed. Can you stop him? Alessandra met his eyes. I already stopped him once, but I can't do it again alone. What do you need? Resources, your full cooperation, and absolute trust that I know what I'm doing, even when you don't understand it. The request hung in the air. Trust. The thing Severino d'Aquila had failed to offer just hours ago. He extended his hand. You have it. Alessandra hesitated for just a moment. Then she shook it. Then let's go to war. The next 4 hours were a masterclass in coordinated crisis response. Alessandra established a command center in the penthouse, connecting multiple secure systems and establishing communication channels that bypassed the compromised network entirely. Riccardo coordinated intelligence gathering, reaching out to contacts who might have information about the Vescovi network's operations. Enzo organized physical security, ensuring that any attempt at a direct assault would be met with overwhelming force. And Severino watched. Not because he was passive, every decision of consequence flowed through him, but because he understood, perhaps for the first time, that watching was not the same as judging. Watching meant observing without assumptions, learning without conclusions, trusting. What he observed was remarkable. Alessandra commanded the digital battlefield with the same natural authority that Severino brought to business negotiations. She anticipated threats before they materialized. She delegated tasks with precise efficiency. And she never, not once, lost her composure, even as the enemy launched wave after wave of attacks that would have overwhelmed any ordinary system administrator. She was extraordinary, and he had fired her for sleeping. The thought was a constant, humiliating presence at the back of his mind. At 2:30 p.m., Alessandra turned away from her screens with an expression he couldn't quite read. I need to show you something, she said. Alone. The conference room was quiet, insulated from the chaos outside. Alessandra placed her laptop on the table between them. The traitors' communications weren't just about the attack, she said. They were about you. She pulled up a series of messages. Severino read them in silence. The messages were detailed assessments of his personality, his decision-making patterns, his relationships with key personnel. They included observations about his morning routine, his preferred restaurants, the names of women he had dated in the past 5 years. And they included a specific prediction. If we time the attack correctly, he'll be at headquarters in the early morning hours. He always responds personally to security alerts. And he'll find our inside distraction exactly where we place her. Severino looked up sharply. Inside distraction? They knew you would come to investigate the security fluctuations. They knew you would find me at my workstation. They planned it that way. Why? Because they needed you to fire me. Alessandra's voice was calm, but her eyes held something deeper. Not anger, exactly, but a profound weariness. I was the only person capable of stopping their secondary attack. If I was still employed when it launched, I would have recognized it immediately and neutralized it. But if I was fired, disgraced, removed from the building, then there would be no one with the knowledge and access to fight back. The realization crashed over Severino like a wave. I did exactly what they wanted. You did exactly what they predicted. And you knew. I suspected. I couldn't be certain until I traced Marco's communications. She paused. That's why I didn't defend myself when you fired me. I needed you to do it. I needed them to think their plan had worked. You let me believe. I let you believe what you were already determined to believe. For the first time, a trace of heat entered her voice. I didn't make you assume I was lazy or incompetent. I didn't make you refuse to ask a single question. That was you, Signor D'Aquila. That was entirely you. The words hung between them. Severino had no response. Because she was right. He had walked into that operations center with assumptions already formed. He had seen what he expected to see. And he had acted on those assumptions without once considering that he might be wrong. I owe you more than an apology, he said finally. I owe you a debt I don't know how to repay. You can start by stopping the Vescovi network. She closed the laptop. We have about 2 hours before their final attack. And this one isn't digital. What do you mean? Marco arranged a physical extraction. Vescovi himself is coming to Milan to personally oversee the destruction of your financial servers. He wants to watch his masterpiece reach its conclusion. Then we'll be waiting for him. It's not that simple. Alessandra pulled up a map of the city. The extraction team is already in place. 12 operatives, heavily armed, with tactical training that matches your best security personnel. They're planning to hit 3 locations simultaneously, your headquarters, the backup server facility in Como, and... She hesitated. And your mother's residence. Severino's face transformed. The controlled businessman disappeared. In his place stood something older, something primal, a protector whose territory had been threatened. They're using her as leverage, Alessandra continued quickly. They don't actually intend to harm her. But they know that the threat alone will force you to divide your security resources, making the other locations vulnerable. How do you know they don't intend to harm her? Because Adriano Vescovi is many things, but he's not stupid. Hurting Luciana D'Aquila would turn this from a business operation into a blood feud. He wants to destroy your organization, not start a war that would consume his as well. Severino's hands were trembling. The tattoos on his knuckles, Honor e Forza, seemed to pulse with barely contained fury. What do you recommend? We spring the trap early, before they're in position. Alessandra's eyes met his. But to do that, I need to go to the backup server facility in Como. Alone? Absolutely not. It's the only way. The facility's security systems are isolated from the main network. I'm the only person who can access them remotely, and I need to be on site to do it. If we send a team, Vescovi's people will see them coming and accelerate their timeline. But one person, approaching quietly, can get inside before they realize what's happening. You're not a field operative. You're a cybersecurity specialist. I'm the person who kept your organization from destruction for 48 hours without any help. I can handle a few hours more. They stared at each other. The same tension that had defined their first encounter was present again, but transformed. This time it wasn't about judgment. It was about trust. I'll go with you, Severino said. That's not. I'm not negotiating. He moved toward the door. You said I need to trust you. I do. But trust isn't the same as abandonment. You don't have to do this alone. Alessandra started to argue, then stopped, because she realized, with a clarity that cut through her exhaustion, that she had been doing everything alone for a very long time. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to accept help. Fine, she said. But if you get in my way, I won't. I will leave you behind. Something shifted in Severino's expression. It might have been respect. It might have been something else. I wouldn't expect anything different. The drive to Como took 90 minutes through rain-slicked roads. Severino drove, a black Maserati that handled the mountain curves like it was born for them. Alessandra sat in the passenger seat, her laptop open, monitoring communications from the emergency network she had established. They didn't speak for the first hour. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people who had said what needed to be said and were now conserving energy for what came next. But as they passed Lake Como, its waters gray and churning beneath the storm, Severino broke the quiet. Why did you take this job? Alessandra looked up from her screen. Ricardo asked me to. That's not what I mean. You could work anywhere. Intelligence agencies, financial institutions, tech companies, they would all pay more than we do with considerably less risk. Why a Mafia family? She was quiet for a moment. Because the work matters. Plenty of work matters. Not like this. She turned to face him. When I worked in corporate security, I protected profits. When I consulted for governments, I protected politicians. Here, I protect people. Real people with families and children and ordinary lives, who would be destroyed if the wrong information reached the wrong hands. The protected witness list. 347 names. I know every single one of them. Elena Marchetti, 73, lives in a small village in Tuscany with her granddaughter. Her son testified against a trafficking ring 15 years ago. He's dead now, but the people who killed him would love to find her. She paused. Tomas Guerrero, 41, restaurant owner in Barcelona. His brother was an accountant who discovered financial crimes and cooperated with prosecutors. The family that was exposed has a long memory. Severino listened without interrupting. I know their stories, Alessandra continued. I know what they risked, what they sacrificed. And I know that without someone watching, without someone fighting, everything they went through would be meaningless. So that's why I took this job. Because those people matter to me, even if they never know my name. The car rounded another curve. Lake Como stretched before them, majestic even in the storm. I didn't know, Severino said quietly. You never asked. No, I didn't. Another silence. Then, the backup facility is 3 kilometers ahead. There's a private road that leads to the rear entrance. It's not on any public maps. You've been here before? I helped design the security system. I know every entrance, every camera, every blind spot. Severino smiled. A real smile, the first she had seen from him. Then lead the way. The backup facility was a converted villa that had belonged to a minor aristocratic family in the 19th century. Its stone walls and classical architecture concealed a fortress of modern technology. Redundant power systems, climate-controlled server rooms, and security measures that Alessandra had personally calibrated. It should have been impregnable. But as they approached the rear entrance, Alessandra knew immediately that something was wrong. Stop the car. Severino obeyed without question. What is it? The exterior lights are off. They're on automatic timers. They should be active. Power failure? This facility has 3 independent power sources. The lights don't fail. She pulled up the facility's security system on her laptop. Everything appeared normal. Too normal. They're spoofing the cameras, she said. Feeding the system recorded footage so no one notices they're inside. How long ago? I can't tell from here, but based on the pattern. She calculated rapidly. At least 40 minutes. Maybe longer. Then they're already in the server room. Not necessarily. The server room has a separate security layer that takes time to bypass. If they're still working on it, we might be able to catch them before they do any damage. Severino's hand moved toward the weapon holstered beneath his jacket. Tell me the plan. I go in through the rear maintenance entrance. It's hidden, designed for emergency evacuations, not regular access. While I work on restoring the security systems, you create a distraction at the main entrance. What kind of distraction? The loud kind. His eyes met hers. You're sure about this? I'm sure that if we don't move now, everything I fought for over the past 2 days will be destroyed. He nodded slowly. Then we move now. He reached out and touched her arm. Just briefly, just enough to convey something words couldn't capture. Be careful. You too. And then they were gone, disappearing into the storm on opposite sides of a building that held the future of everything they were trying to protect. The maintenance entrance was exactly where Alessandra remembered. Hidden behind a decorative stone panel, accessible only through a keypad that required both a code and a biometric scan. She pressed her thumb to the sensor, entered her sequence, and slipped inside before the door had fully opened. The corridor beyond was dark. Emergency lighting provided just enough illumination to navigate. Pale red strips along the floor that guided her toward the server room. She moved silently, her sneakers making no sound on the polished concrete. Ahead, she could hear voices. 2 men, speaking in accented Italian. They were discussing the server room's final security layer with the casual professionalism of people who had done this many times before. 3 more minutes for the decryption. Then we download everything and trigger the wipe. Vescovi wants confirmation before we proceed. He'll have it. The other teams are already in position. Alessandra's heart rate spiked. The other teams. That meant Severino's mother was still in danger. That meant the headquarters was still vulnerable. She needed to end this. Now. But before she could formulate a plan, an explosion rocked the building. The distraction, Severino's version of loud, apparently involved considerable firepower. The voices ahead cursed, and she heard rapid footsteps as one of the men moved to investigate. One guard remaining. One chance. Alessandra stepped into the corridor, her laptop already open, her fingers flying across the keys. The guard saw her immediately. He raised his weapon. But Alessandra was faster. Not with a weapon. She had never fired a gun in her life, but with something far more dangerous. She triggered the facility's emergency lockdown. Steel doors slammed down throughout the building, sealing the guard in a corridor segment barely 3 meters long. His weapon discharged reflexively, but the bullets ricocheted harmlessly off reinforced walls. "What the? You're trapped," Alessandra said calmly. "The doors are rated for explosive breach. You can't shoot your way out." "Who the hell are you?" "The woman you were supposed to get fired." She moved past his sealed section toward the server room. Behind her, she could hear him screaming into his radio. No response. The lockdown had also triggered a communications blackout. The server room doors were still open, held by an override the attackers had installed. Inside, a single figure stood before the main terminal. Tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a gray suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Adriano Vescovi turned to face her with an expression of genuine surprise. Dottoressa Fiorini. His cultured voice was exactly as she remembered from the phone call. "I must admit, I didn't expect you to be here in person. I thought we had removed you from the equation." "You thought wrong." "Apparently so." He gestured toward the terminal behind him. "Though I confess, I'm curious how you plan to stop what's already in motion. The download is nearly complete. In approximately 90 seconds, I'll have everything I need to destroy the D'Aquila family. Their finances, their secrets, their protected witnesses. And then I simply walk away." "You're not walking anywhere." "The lockdown? Please." He smiled. "My people disabled the external locks before they entered. This facility is secure from outside interference, not inside departure. When my extraction team arrives in 15 minutes, I'll leave through the front door." Alessandra's mind raced. He was right. She could see it on the terminal. The download progress bar was at 87% and climbing. In less than 2 minutes, he would have everything. She needed to stop the download. But to do that, she needed access to the terminal. And Vescovi stood directly between her and the keyboard. "You're stalling," she said. "Why?" "Because I want you to understand something." He took a step toward her. "This isn't personal. I don't hate the D'Aquila family. I don't have any particular grievance against you. This is simply business, the business of power, which flows to those who control information. And the 347 people on that list? They're just business too. Leverage. Nothing more. Another step. Names that can be sold to the highest bidder, or used to extract concessions, or simply held in reserve for future negotiations. Their value isn't in their deaths. It's in the threat of their deaths. You're a monster. I'm a realist." He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and faintly citrus. "But I can also be a generous employer. You've impressed me, Dottoressa. Your skills are exceptional. Your determination is admirable. And your current employer just fired you without cause." He apologized. Words. Empty words from a man who will never truly respect you. "But I could offer you something different. A partnership, not employment. Equal standing in an organization that values intelligence over loyalty." The download reached 95%. "Think about it," Vescovi continued. "You could have resources beyond anything the D'Aquila family could provide. You could work on problems that actually challenge your abilities. And you would never again be dismissed by someone who couldn't recognize your worth. 98%. All you have to do is step aside. Alessandra looked into his silver eyes. She saw intelligence there, an ambition, and the absolute certainty of someone who had always gotten what he wanted. You're right, she said. He smiled. About everything, she continued. Severino d'Aquila fired me without asking questions. He judged me based on assumptions. He failed to see what I was sacrificing to protect his organization. And yet you came back to save him. Why? The download reached 99%. Because protecting innocent people isn't about who employs me. It's about who I am. She moved. Not toward Vescovi. Toward the wall panel 3 meters to his left. The emergency fire suppression control. Her hand slammed the release. Halon gas flooded the server room with a deafening roar. The fire suppression system was designed to protect the servers from flame damage, but it also triggered an automatic shutdown of all active processes, including downloads. Vescovi lunged for her, but the gas disoriented him just long enough for her to reach the terminal. 99.7%. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. 99.8%. Emergency abort. 99.9%. System override. The download froze, then reversed. The data that had been copying to Vescovi's external drives began systematically erasing itself, replaced by corrupted garbage that would take months to sort through. No! Vescovi grabbed her arm, spinning her around with surprising strength for a man his age. His silver eyes were no longer cultured. They were murderous. Do you have any idea what you've just cost me? About 25 million euros in bribes to Marco Delacroix, plus 18 months of planning and a partnership with people who will be very unhappy when they learn you failed. His hand closed around her throat. I should kill you right now. You could try. The voice came from behind him. Severino d'Aquila stood in the server room doorway, his weapon raised, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the man threatening the woman who had saved his empire. But I wouldn't recommend it. What happened next was both anticlimactic and deeply satisfying. Vescovi released Alessandra immediately. Whatever his talents as a criminal mastermind, he apparently recognized when he was outmatched in a direct confrontation. Severino's people, who had been positioned around the facility since before the original attack, moved in with precise efficiency. Within 10 minutes, Vescovi and his entire extraction team were in custody. Within 20 minutes, word came that the teams targeting headquarters and Luciana d'Aquila's residence had been neutralized as well. Within an hour, Marco Delacroix was arrested at a private airfield, attempting to flee the country with a suitcase containing 3 million euros in cash and enough encrypted data to negotiate a very comfortable exile. And Alessandra Fiorini, who had been awake for over 60 hours, who had fought invisible wars and visible enemies, who had been fired and rehired and threatened and saved, Alessandra Fiorini finally collapsed. She woke in a hospital bed. Sunlight streamed through windows that overlooked Lake Como, turning the water to gold. Beside her, in a chair that looked far too small for his frame, Severino d'Aquila slept. His black suit was rumpled. His jaw was shadowed with stubble. His hand rested on the edge of her bed, as if he had fallen asleep while reaching for her. The tattoo on his neck was visible. Il controllo inizia con la fiducia. Control begins with trust. Alessandra watched him for a long moment. Then softly, she touched his hand. His eyes opened immediately, the reflexes of a man who had learned to wake at the slightest sound. You're awake. So are you now. He straightened in the chair, and she saw something in his expression that she had never seen before. Vulnerability. I wasn't sure you would wake up, he said. The doctor said exhaustion, dehydration, stress. Your body was shutting down by the time we got you here. How long have I been out? 18 hours. He paused. I've been here the entire time. Why? The question hung between them. Severino took a breath. Because I owed you a debt. Because you saved everything that matters to me. Because... He stopped, seemingly struggling with words that didn't come easily. Because when I thought I might lose you, I realized that losing you would mean losing something I can't replace. Alessandra's heart pounded. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, he continued. What I did, firing you without understanding, judging you without asking. It was everything I've always despised in others. I failed you in the moment when you needed support, not condemnation. You did. I know. His steel-gray eyes met hers. And I know that words aren't enough. Actions matter more than apologies. But I want you to know that whatever happens next, I will spend every day trying to earn the trust one should have given you from the beginning. The sunlight shifted, catching the Roman lion on his forearm. Strength, leadership, protection. But also, she realized now, the capacity for change. Ask me, she said. He blinked. Ask you what? What you should have asked that night in the operations center. What you should have asked before you ever put a termination letter beside my keyboard. Understanding dawned in his expression. What were you doing? I was protecting your family. She held his gaze. I was protecting 347 innocent people. I was fighting a war that no one else knew was happening, because the moment anyone else knew, the enemy would have won. And you didn't defend yourself because I couldn't. Because explaining would have exposed the traitor hunt before I had proof. Because the enemy was counting on you to react exactly the way you did. They used me against you. They used your patterns. Your assumptions. She paused. Your fear. Severino's jaw tightened. I was afraid, he admitted. Not of the security incident, of being vulnerable. Of having someone close enough to see my weaknesses and exploit them. So I pushed away the one person who was actually fighting to protect me. And now I'm more afraid of losing you than of being vulnerable. The words landed like a physical impact. Neither of them moved for a long moment. Then Alessandra reached out and took his hand. I'm not ready to forgive you, she said quietly. What you did hurt me in ways I don't know how to explain. You saw me at my most exhausted, my most depleted, and your first instinct was condemnation. That's not something I can just forget. His expression flickered with pain, but he nodded. But, she continued, I'm willing to give you the chance to do better. Not because I'm weak or because I need this job or because I feel obligated. Because I've seen the man you could be. The one who drove through a storm to fight beside me, who apologized in front of his entire organization, who sat beside my bed for 18 hours just in case I woke up. She squeezed his hand. That man is worth giving a second chance. Severino's eyes glistened. He brought her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss against her knuckles. Thank you, he whispered. I won't waste it. The nurse knocked softly before entering to check Alessandra's vital signs. She found her patient sitting up in bed, speaking quietly with the most feared mafia boss in Italy. What she couldn't see were the encrypted files still waiting on Alessandra's laptop. Files that contained one final piece of evidence she hadn't yet shared. Evidence that Adriano Vescovi wasn't the mastermind of this conspiracy. He was just the public face. The real architect was someone much closer to the D'Aquila family. Someone who had been manipulating events from the shadows for years. Someone who had helped plan Marco Delacroix's betrayal, Vescovi's attack, and, most disturbing of all, Severino's decision to fire the one person capable of stopping them. As Alessandra looked into Severino's grateful eyes, a single name echoed in her mind. A name that would destroy everything they had just begun to build together. A name she would have to reveal within the next 24 hours. The name of the person who had been listening to every conversation in the penthouse. Watching every security feed. Waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The shadow conspirator. And until she identified how far the corruption spread, no one, not even Severino D'Aquila, could be completely trusted. The lake outside the hospital window shifted from gold to copper as the afternoon deepened. Alessandra watched the light change while her mind worked through calculations that had nothing to do with rest or recovery. Severino had stepped out to take a call from Enzo, and for the first time in hours, she was alone with her thoughts. And her laptop, she opened it carefully, angling the screen away from the door. The encrypted files she had extracted during the final minutes of the server room confrontation sat in a hidden partition, protected by layers of security that even Ricardo would struggle to penetrate. She had told Severino about Marco Delacroix. She had told him about Vescovi. She had given him every piece of the puzzle except one. The piece that terrified her. During her trace of Marco's communications, she had discovered something that didn't fit the pattern. A secondary communication channel, separate from the one connecting Marco to the Vescovi network, using encryption protocols so sophisticated that they could only have been designed by someone with access to military-grade cryptographic tools. Someone was giving Marco orders. Not Vescovi. Someone else. The messages were fragmented. She had only managed to capture partial exchanges before the system purge destroyed the rest. But what she had was enough to draw a devastating conclusion. The fragments referenced operational details that only someone inside Severino's innermost circle could know. Meeting locations that changed daily. Security rotation schedules that were never written down. Personal conversations that took place in rooms swept for surveillance equipment 3 times a week. Whoever was behind this had access to everything. And the most recent fragment, time-stamped just 6 hours before Severino had fired her, contained 7 words that turned her blood to ice. She's close. Make sure he removes her. They hadn't just predicted that Severino would fire her. They had ensured it. Someone had whispered in his ear. Someone had pointed him toward the operations center at 3:47 a.m. Someone had made certain that the one person standing between the D'Aquila family and destruction would be removed at precisely the right moment. The question was who? Alessandra's fingers trembled as she scrolled through the partial communication logs. The encryption was extraordinary. She had never seen anything quite like it, even during her time consulting for government agencies. Breaking it completely would take days, possibly weeks. But she had one advantage the shadow conspirator didn't know about. During the server room confrontation, when she had triggered the halon gas and crashed Vescovi's download, a secondary process had been running in the background. A silent packet sniffer, designed to capture any communication signals within a 50-meter radius. It had captured something. A brief, encrypted transmission from inside the server room itself. Not from Vescovi's equipment. From a device that wasn't supposed to be there at all. A device hidden inside the building's own infrastructure. Someone had been watching the entire confrontation in real time, and the transmission had been sent to a receiving station somewhere in Milan. Alessandra closed the laptop as footsteps approached her door. Severino returned, his expression troubled. Enzo just confirmed that Marco is cooperating. He's given up his contacts within the Vescovi network, safe house locations, financial routing details. But what? He says there's someone else. Someone above Vescovi in the hierarchy. He doesn't know who. All communication came through encrypted channels he couldn't trace. But he says this person was the one who originally approached him 18 months ago. Alessandra's pulse quickened. What exactly did Marco say about this person? Severino sat in the chair beside her bed. The cathedral and olive branch tattoo on his left forearm was visible beneath his rolled sleeve, the circuitry woven through the ancient design catching the afternoon light. He said they knew things about the organization that no outsider could know. Personal details, family history, things that only someone who had been trusted for years would have access to. Did he give a name? No. He said he never learned one. All contact was digital, always encrypted, always anonymous. But he described something that bothered Enzo. What? The voice. On the few occasions they spoke directly, Marco said the voice was disguised electronically, but certain speech patterns came through. Italian, obviously, educated, and familiar. He said it felt like someone he had heard before but couldn't quite place. Familiar. Alessandra absorbed this, fitting it into the puzzle she was constructing. I need to get back to work, she said. The doctors want you to rest for at least 48 more hours. The doctors don't know that someone inside your organization is still actively working against you. Severino's expression shifted. The vulnerability he had shown earlier hardened into the focused intensity of a man who had survived decades in a world where trust could be fatal. What haven't you told me? She met his steel-gray eyes. I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to want to react immediately. I need you to promise me that you won't. I can't make that promise without knowing. Then I can't tell you. They stared at each other. The power dynamic between them had shifted fundamentally since that night in the operations center. He was still the head of the family, still the man whose word was law in his organization. But she was the woman who had saved everything he had, and they both knew it. "Fine," he said. "I promise. Someone manipulated you into firing me. Not just the hackers. Someone specific, someone close to you, someone who knew exactly how to trigger your response." She watched his jaw tighten. "I've traced a secondary communication channel connected to Marco's betrayal. Whoever operates this channel has access to your private meetings, your personal schedules, your most sensitive conversations. They're not just an accomplice, they're the architect. Vescovi was their weapon. Marco was their tool. And you were their instrument. Who? I don't know yet, but I'm close. The encryption they used has a signature I can work with, and the transmission I captured at the Como facility gives me a geographical anchor point. With the right resources and another 48 hours, I can identify them." Severino stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The olive branches tattooed on his left forearm seemed to writhe as his muscles tensed. Family, legacy, wisdom, all of it threatened by a shadow he couldn't see. 48 hours. That's what I need. You'll have everything. Whatever resources, whatever access, whatever support. And discretion. No one can know what I'm looking for. Not Enzo, not Ricardo, not your mother. No one. You think it could be someone that close? I think whoever this is has been inside your inner circle for years. Until I know who they are, everyone is a suspect. The words were harsh but necessary. Severino paced to the window. Lake Como stretched before him, serene and indifferent to the chaos consuming his world. "Including me?" he asked quietly. "No." The answer came without hesitation. "Not you." "How can you be sure?" "Because whoever did this needed you to make a specific mistake at a specific time. They used your patterns against you. You were the weapon, not the wielder." He turned back to face her. "And you trust me enough to believe that?" "I trust the evidence. The evidence says you were manipulated, not complicit." Something passed between them, a current of understanding that went deeper than professional alliance. "Then let's find them," he said. Together, they discharged her against medical advice. Alessandra insisted, and the doctors quickly learned that arguing with her was roughly as productive as arguing with the lake about the direction of its currents. Severino arranged a secure workspace, not at headquarters, which might be compromised, and not at the penthouse, which was almost certainly under surveillance. Instead, he provided a safe house in a quiet neighborhood near the Certosa di Pavia, a medieval monastery whose thick stone walls had kept secrets for 600 years. The safe house was modest by D'Aquila standards, 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, a study that had been converted into a secure operations center with military-grade communication equipment and enough computing power to run a small country. Alessandra set up her workstation with the focused precision of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. Multiple monitors, encrypted connections, analysis software she had written herself during late nights in her Brera apartment. Severino watched from the doorway, a cup of espresso in each hand. "You need to eat," he said. "When did you last have a real meal?" "I had something. At some point." "That's not an answer. I'll eat when I've made progress." He set the espresso beside her keyboard and disappeared into the kitchen. 20 minutes later, he returned with a plate of pasta aglio e olio that smelled like it had been prepared by someone who actually knew what they were doing. Alessandra looked at the plate, then at him. "You cook." "My mother taught me." She said any man who couldn't feed himself didn't deserve to eat. Despite everything, Alessandra smiled. She ate while she worked, and the food was excellent. The first 12 hours of investigation confirmed her worst fears. The shadow conspirators' communication infrastructure was far more extensive than she had initially realized. Hidden relay stations scattered across northern Italy, each one disguised as legitimate telecommunications equipment. A network of compromised devices inside D'Aquila properties. Not just headquarters, but restaurants, warehouses, and private residences. Someone had spent years building an invisible surveillance empire inside the D'Aquila organization. The scale of it was breathtaking and deeply personal, because as Alessandra mapped the network, she began to understand something that changed the nature of the threat entirely. This wasn't about money. The Vescovi operation, the hacking, the data theft, the threatened exposure of protected witnesses, had been presented as a financial attack. Steal the money, destroy the records, leverage the information for profit. But the shadow conspirators' communications told a different story. In the encrypted fragments she managed to decode, there were no references to financial gain. No discussions of payment or profit sharing. No negotiations about the value of stolen data. Instead, the messages were obsessed with one thing: destruction. Complete, absolute, irreversible destruction of the D'Aquila family. Not as a business. Not as a criminal organization. As a family. The messages referenced Severino by name, not as a target, but as an object of personal hatred so intense that it radiated through the cold, encrypted text like heat from a fire. He must lose everything before the end. Let him watch it burn. When there is nothing left, he will understand what he took from me. This wasn't a business rival. This was someone driven by vengeance. And vengeance, Alessandra knew, was far more dangerous than greed. Greed could be satisfied. Vengeance could only be exhausted. At 3 a.m., Severino found her staring at a blank screen. Not because she had stopped working, because she had reached a conclusion she wasn't ready to share. "Talk to me," he said, settling into the chair beside her. The safe house was quiet around them. Outside, the monastery's bells had long since fallen silent for the night. Alessandra didn't look at him. "When your father died," she said carefully, "what happened to his inner circle?" Severino's expression didn't change, but she felt the temperature in the room drop by several degrees. "My father's death isn't relevant to. Answer the question, please." A long silence. "When my father died, his inner circle fractured. Some remained loyal to the family and transitioned their allegiance to me. Some retired. Some disagreed with the direction I intended to take the organization. What happened to those who disagreed? They were given the opportunity to leave peacefully, with appropriate severance. Most accepted. Most. One didn't." Alessandra turned to face him. "Tell me about the one who didn't." Severino's hand moved unconsciously to his right forearm, touching the Roman lion tattoo as if drawing strength from it. His name was Vittorio Sante. He had been my father's closest advisor for 25 years. When I took over, I wanted to modernize the organization, reduce violence, expand legitimate business operations, invest in technology and infrastructure. Vittorio opposed every change. He believed I was betraying my father's legacy. What happened? We argued, privately at first, then publicly. He challenged my authority in front of senior members, questioned my judgment, suggested that my father would have been ashamed. The words clearly still carried weight. I gave him an ultimatum: accept the new direction or leave. He left. Where did he go? I don't know. He disappeared. Changed his identity, presumably. He had the resources and the contacts to vanish completely. When was this? 8 years ago. 8 years. Long enough to build a surveillance network. Long enough to recruit insiders. Long enough to plan an operation of devastating complexity. Severino. Alessandra's voice was steady, but her eyes held a gravity that made him sit straighter. I need you to tell me everything about Vittorio Sante. Everything. His background, his skills, his connections, his family. Everything. Why? Because I think he's the one behind all of this. The profile that emerged over the next 2 hours was chilling. Vittorio Sante had been more than just an advisor. He had been the architect of the D'Aquila family's intelligence operations for over 2 decades. He had built the original surveillance systems, recruited and managed informants, and maintained relationships with intelligence contacts across Europe. He had also, Severino admitted, been something of a father figure after Severino's own father became ill. He had taught the young heir how to read people, how to manage complex organizations, how to balance force with diplomacy. He knew me better than anyone, Severino said. his voice carrying a weight of complicated emotion. My patterns, my instincts, my weaknesses. If anyone could manipulate me into making a specific mistake at a specific time, it would be him. Yes. Alessandra pulled up the communication fragments on her screen. Look at the speech patterns in these messages. Even through encryption and digital disguise, there are tells. The syntax is formal, almost classical. The Italian is educated but slightly archaic. Someone who learned the language in an academic context rather than conversational. Vittorio was educated at the University of Bologna, classical studies before he entered the intelligence world. And look at this. She highlighted a specific phrase. Let him watch it burn. The emotional intensity increases whenever the messages reference you personally. This isn't strategic language. It's intimate. Whoever wrote this knows you deeply personally, and feels betrayed by you on a fundamental level. Severino stared at the screen. He was like family, and you exiled him. I gave him a choice. You gave him an ultimatum. To a man who had dedicated 25 years of his life to your family, who had helped raise you, who believed he was protecting your father's legacy. You told him to fall in line or get out. I was right to modernize. You were right about the direction. But the way you handled it. She paused, choosing her words carefully. You made the same mistake with Vittorio that you made with me. You decided what was best, and you expected everyone to accept it without question. When they didn't, you removed them. The parallel landed with visible force. Severino leaned back in his chair, his face shadowed by the monitor's glow. The tattoo on his neck, "Control begins with trust," was barely visible in the dim light. I keep making the same mistake. Recognizing that is the first step toward stopping. And the second step? Finding Vittorio before he strikes again. Because whatever you did to him 8 years ago, he spent every day since then planning to make you pay for it. And the Vescovi operation was just the beginning. Dawn broke over the monastery, painting the ancient stones in shades of rose and gold. Alessandra had been working through the night, fueled by espresso and the electric clarity of a mind operating at peak capacity. The transmission she had captured at the Como facility had yielded its secrets at 4:47 a.m. A geographical anchor point that narrowed the shadow conspirators' location to a specific district in Milan, the Porta Nuova business district. More specifically, a building that housed the offices of a private consulting firm called Meridian Strategic Group. Meridian Strategic Group had no website, no public employees, no listed clients. It existed only as a registered business entity with the Italian Chamber of Commerce, occupying a single floor of an otherwise unremarkable office building. But its digital footprint, once Alessandra knew where to look, was enormous. The firm's servers had been routing encrypted communications across Europe for years. Financial transactions in the hundreds of millions of euros. Surveillance data from compromised devices in a dozen different organizations, not just the D'Aquila family, but rival families, government agencies, and legitimate corporations. Vittorio Sante hadn't just been plotting revenge. He had been building an empire of his own. An invisible empire, constructed entirely from information, operating in the shadows where traditional power couldn't reach. This is bigger than one man's vendetta, Alessandra said when Severino joined her at dawn. Vittorio has been selling intelligence to anyone willing to pay. The Vescovi network was just one client. He has connections to organized crime groups across Europe, to corrupt government officials, to corporate espionage operations worth billions. And the attack on us? Personal. Everything else is business, but the D'Aquila operation was personal. He used his own resources, not a client's. He spent his own money to recruit Marco. He personally designed the attack timeline, including the manipulation that led to my firing. How do we stop him? We can't just arrest him, he's too well connected, and the moment he feels threatened, he'll trigger failsafes that could expose every piece of sensitive information he's collected. The protected witness list, your financial records, intelligence about rival families that could start a dozen wars. Then what? We need to get inside Meridian Strategic Group, access his servers directly, find and neutralize his failsafes before he can trigger them. And then, only then, Can we remove him? How long? I can be ready by tonight. Severino shook his head. Not you. Not alone. Not again. Severino, I let you go alone once. I'm not doing it again. This isn't about protection. I don't need you to. I know you don't need me to protect you. You've proven that beyond any doubt. He moved closer. The morning light caught the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the stubble darkening his jaw, the intensity in his steel-gray gaze. But you don't have to prove anything anymore. Not to me. Not to anyone. Let me stand beside you. Not in front of you. Beside you. The words settled around her like a warm cloak. Okay, she said softly. Beside me. They spent the day preparing. Enzo was brought in, his loyalty confirmed by evidence that placed him in Sardinia during every critical communication window the shadow conspirator had used. His scarred face registered shock, then fury, then cold determination as Alessandra laid out the full scope of Vittorio's operation. I'll kill him myself, Enzo said flatly. No one is killing anyone, Alessandra replied. We need him alive. His fail-safes are biometrically locked. If his heart stops, they trigger automatically. Then I'll hurt him very badly without killing him. Despite the gravity of the situation, Severino's mouth twitched in something approaching a smile. Ricardo was brought in next, his expertise essential for the digital infiltration that would precede the physical operation. His weathered face remained calm as Alessandra explained the plan, but she noticed his hands trembling slightly. You know Vittorio, she said. It wasn't a question. I worked under him for 6 years when I first joined the organization. Before he was asked to leave, Ricardo met her eyes. He trained me, Alessandra. Half of everything I know about intelligence work, I learned from him. Then you understand why he's dangerous. Better than anyone. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. At 11 p.m., Ricardo would initiate a digital probe of Meridian Strategic Group's external network, not to penetrate it, but to make Vittorio believe someone was trying. The natural response would be to activate defensive protocols, which would require his personal presence at the servers. While Vittorio was focused on the digital threat, Severino and Enzo would approach the building through a service entrance that Alessandra had identified through satellite imagery and municipal records. Their objective was to physically secure the floor and prevent Vittorio from leaving. Alessandra would enter separately, through the building's ventilation system, a route that bypassed every security measure she had identified, and access the server room directly. Her mission was the most critical. Neutralize the failsafes, secure the data, and prevent any transmission that could endanger the protected witnesses or trigger wider chaos. The timing has to be perfect, Alessandra emphasized during the final briefing. If Vittorio realizes what's happening before I've disabled the failsafes, he can destroy everything with a single command. We get one shot at this. Then we won't miss, Severino said. The drive back to Milan felt different from the drive to Como. Less desperate, more deliberate, and charged with something that neither of them acknowledged directly but both felt with every passing kilometer. Severino drove again, his hands steady on the wheel, the tattoo on his knuckles visible in the dashboard light. Honor e forza. Honor and strength. After this is over, he said, breaking a long silence. What do you want? What do you mean? I mean your life, your career, your future. You've spent 3 years protecting my family. What do you want for yourself? Alessandra watched the city lights growing closer. I've never really thought about it. Think about it now. She was quiet for a long time. I want to matter, she said finally. Not in a grand, historical sense. I don't need monuments or recognition. I want to know that the work I do makes a genuine difference in people's lives. That because I existed, someone was safer, some family stayed together, some child grew up without fear. You already have that. Maybe, but I want it to be seen. Not publicly, I don't need fame. But I want the people I work with to understand what I sacrifice and why. I want to be valued. The word hung in the air. Not just useful, she continued. Valued. There's a difference. I know there is. His voice was low. I should have known it sooner. They entered the city limits. Milan glittered around them, beautiful and dangerous, full of secrets. After tonight, Severino said, if you'll let me, I'd like to show you what valued looks like. Alessandra didn't respond immediately, but she didn't look away either. At 10:45 p.m., they were in position. Alessandra crouched in a maintenance corridor on the 4th floor of the Porta Nuova office building, her laptop connected to the building's internal network through a junction box she had identified during her reconnaissance. Her dark turtleneck and tactical trousers replaced her usual business attire, and her hair was pulled back in its customary tight ponytail. Through her earpiece, she could hear Severino and Enzo's breathing as they waited near the service entrance 2 floors below. Ricardo's voice crackled through the encrypted channel from the safe house. Probe initiated. Meridian's external defenses are responding. Someone inside just logged into the primary server. Biometric authentication confirmed. Vittorio is at his terminal, Alessandra confirmed. Beginning approach. The ventilation shaft was tight, barely wide enough for her slim frame, but she moved through it with the practiced ease of someone who had mapped every centimeter on her screen before entering. 12 meters. 8 meters. 4 meters. She could see into the server room through a ventilation grate. And there he was. Vittorio Sante stood before a wall of monitors, his back to her, his silver-white hair cropped close to his skull. He was smaller than she expected, lean, wiry, with the coiled energy of a man who compensated for his physical size with intellectual dominance. His fingers moved across the keyboard with the fluency of someone who spoke code as a native language. Probe detected, he murmured to himself. Ricardo's signature. Of course. The old student comes to test the old teacher. He smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Let's give him something to study. He began deploying countermeasures, sophisticated ones that would keep Ricardo occupied for hours. While he was distracted, Alessandra removed the ventilation grate with careful, silent precision. She lowered herself into the server room. Her sneakers touched the floor without a sound. The failsafe control panel was 8 meters to her right, partially concealed behind a server rack. She could see its status lights blinking in the dimness, 3 green indicators confirming that the failsafes were armed and ready. She began moving toward it. 6 meters. 4 meters. 2 meters. Her hand reached for the panel. I was wondering when you'd come. Alessandra froze. Vittorio hadn't turned around. His hands still rested on the keyboard. His eyes still watched the monitors. But his voice, cultured, precise, carrying the weight of decades of intelligence experience, was directed unmistakably at her. Don't worry, he continued. I'm not going to trigger the failsafes. Not yet, anyway. I want to talk first. There's nothing to talk about. There's everything to talk about. He turned slowly to face her. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they held an intelligence so sharp it was almost painful to meet directly. Alessandra Fiorini, the woman who stopped my operation twice, who fought 48 hours without sleep to protect a man who fired her, who came back to save him even after he proved he didn't deserve her loyalty. I didn't come back for him. No, you came back for the 347 people on that list. I know. He smiled again, gentler this time, almost paternal. That's what makes you exceptional. You act on principle, not on personal attachment. It's a rare quality. You're stalling. I'm observing. There's a difference. He took a step toward her. Tell me, did Severino send you, or did you volunteer? Does it matter? It matters to me, because if he sent you into danger alone again, then he hasn't learned anything, and everything I've done is justified. He's here, Alessandra said. In the building. He wanted to come with me. Something flickered in Vittorio's dark eyes. Interesting. Why are you doing this? She asked. And don't give me the vendetta speech. I've read your communications. I know about Meridian Strategic Group, about the intelligence network, about the clients. This stopped being about revenge a long time ago. For the first time, Vittorio's composure cracked slightly. You're partly right, he said. It did start as revenge. When Severino cast me out, After 25 years of service, of sacrifice, of treating his family as my own, I wanted to destroy him. I wanted him to feel what I felt. The shock of betrayal, the humiliation of being discarded, the loneliness of realizing that everything you gave meant nothing. But revenge is a poor business model. It's emotionally satisfying but strategically limited. So I expanded. I built something larger, a network that would outlast any personal grudge, that would generate revenue and influence independent of my feelings about one man. And the attack on the D'Aquila family was supposed to be the final chapter, the closing of old accounts, after which I would have moved on entirely, retired to somewhere warm, left the network to my successors, lived out my remaining years in comfort. But Alessandra Fiorini stopped you. Twice. He almost laughed. Which is more than anyone else has managed in 8 years. A sound from below, the service entrance opening. Severino and Enzo were inside the building. Vittorio heard it too. His expression hardened. Time's running short. So let me make you an offer, Dottoressa. A real one, not the recruitment pitch Vescovi attempted. I'm listening. Walk away. Take the protected witness list. I'll give you a clean copy, uncompromised, guaranteed secure. Take it and walk away. The D'Aquila family will be damaged, but the innocent people on that list will be safe. And in return, you let me leave. You don't interfere with Meridian's operations. You don't share what you've learned about my network with anyone. And Severino? He loses his financial infrastructure, his intelligence archives, and approximately 60% of his legitimate business operations. Painful but survivable. He'll rebuild. Men like him always do. And you'll just stop? After 8 years of planning. I said I'd close old accounts. This would be a negotiated settlement rather than a total victory. But I'm pragmatic enough to accept it. Footsteps in the corridor outside. Getting closer. Vittorio's hand moved toward the keyboard. Decide quickly, Dottoressa. Once Severino enters this room, the offer expires, and I trigger the failsafes. You said your failsafes are biometrically locked to your heartbeat. They are. So if you trigger them, you're committed. No reversal. Everything goes public, including information that would expose your network, your clients, your operations. Mutually assured destruction. Yes. That's insane. It's leverage. His hand hovered over the keyboard. 10 seconds. Alessandra's mind moved at the speed of light. She couldn't let him trigger the failsafes. The exposure of the protected witness list alone could cost dozens of lives. But she couldn't accept his offer either, because leaving Meridian intact meant leaving a weapon pointed at thousands of innocent people across Europe. She needed a third option, and she had exactly 10 seconds to find it. 5 seconds, Vittorio said. Alessandra did the only thing she could. She told the truth. Severino was wrong to exile you, she said. He handled it badly, the same way he handles everything that threatens his sense of control. He pushes people away instead of listening. He judges instead of understanding. And he hurt you deeply. Vittorio's hand paused. But you were wrong too, she continued. You spent 8 years building an empire of revenge and calling it business. You endangered hundreds of innocent lives to punish one man. You became exactly what you accused Severino of being, someone who destroys because they can, not because they should. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I was fired by the same man, for the same reasons, with the same contemptuous dismissal. The difference is that I chose to fight for the people who needed me instead of fighting against the man who wronged me. The door burst open. Severino stood in the doorway, Enzo behind him, both with weapons drawn. Vittorio's hand lunged for the keyboard. Alessandra was faster. Not physically. She couldn't have reached him in time to stop his hand. But she didn't need to, because while she had been talking, keeping Vittorio's attention focused on her words, she had been doing something else entirely. Her laptop, still connected to the building's network through the junction box in the maintenance corridor, had been running a program she had prepared hours ago. A program designed to do one thing: assume remote control of the failsafe system. The moment Vittorio's finger touched the key, Nothing happened. He pressed again. Nothing. He looked at his screen, and his face went white. The failsafes had been disarmed. The biometric lock had been overridden. And every piece of data in Meridian Strategic Group servers was being copied to a secure location that Alessandra controlled. How? Vittorio whispered. You built your failsafe system on a framework I designed 4 years ago. Published under a pseudonym, open source, freely available. You modified it, but the core architecture was mine. She met his eyes. I always leave a back door in my own code. For a long moment, Vittorio Sante stared at her. Then slowly he sat down in his chair. The fight went out of him like air from a punctured tire. 25 years, he said quietly. 25 years I served that family. And the one person who finally outmaneuvered me is someone they nearly threw away. They didn't throw me away, Alessandra said. And if you had come to Severino with your grievances instead of building an empire of revenge, he might not have thrown you away either. You don't know that. No, I don't. But you never gave him the chance. She turned to Severino. His weapon was still raised. His steel-gray eyes locked on the man who had nearly destroyed everything he had built. The tattoo on his neck pulsed with his rapid heartbeat. Put the gun down, Alessandra said. He tried to destroy my family, and he failed, because your family is stronger than his anger. She stepped between them. Put the gun down, Severino. Please. A long, agonizing moment. Then Severino lowered his weapon. Enzo moved forward to secure Vittorio, handling him firmly but without violence. The old intelligence master offered no resistance. As Enzo led him toward the door, Vittorio paused. Severino. The two men looked at each other across 30 years of shared history. Mentor and student, allies and enemies, family and strangers. Your father would have been proud of you, Vittorio said. Not of the boy who exiled me, but of the man who lowered his gun. Then he was gone. The aftermath unfolded over the following weeks with the complex precision of a symphony resolving toward its final chord. Meridian Strategic Group was dismantled under Alessandra's supervision. Every piece of intelligence Vittorio had collected was catalogued, analyzed, and either destroyed or transferred to appropriate authorities through channels that protected the D'Aquila family's interests. The protected witness list remained secure. All 347 people continued their lives without ever knowing how close they had come to catastrophe. Adriano Vescovi cooperated with investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence, providing testimony that led to the disruption of cybercrime operations across 3 continents. Marco Delacroix was dealt with through channels that Alessandra chose not to inquire about too closely. And Vittorio Sante, stripped of his network and his resources, was placed under house arrest in a small village in Umbria. Severino arranged for his basic needs to be met, not out of forgiveness, but out of recognition that the old man had once been family, and that the line between justice and vengeance was thinner than he had previously understood. Through it all, Alessandra and Severino worked side by side, not as boss and employee, not as protector and protected, as partners. The transformation in their relationship didn't happen in a single dramatic moment. It happened in dozens of small ones, in the way Severino began asking questions before making decisions, in the way he sought her opinion on matters that had nothing to do with cybersecurity, business strategy, personnel management, the future direction of the organization, in the way he listened, really listened, with the full attention of a man who had finally understood that listening wasn't weakness. It was the foundation of everything he claimed to value. And in the way Alessandra gradually lowered the walls she had built around herself. She had spent her career being the invisible protector, the person who sacrificed without recognition, who worked in shadows while others stood in the light. Severino's determination to value her publicly, consistently, and without reservation cracked something open inside her that she hadn't known was sealed shut. She began to laugh more, to sleep more, to eat meals at actual tables instead of beside keyboards, to wear her hair down. For months after the Vescovi crisis, Severino invited her to dinner. Not a working dinner, not a strategic briefing disguised as a meal. An actual dinner, at a restaurant overlooking the Navigli Canal, with candles and wine and absolutely no discussion of encryption protocols. Alessandra wore a dark green dress that she had purchased specifically for the occasion, the first non-work-related clothing purchase she had made in over 2 years. Severino wore a charcoal suit with an open collar that revealed the tattoo on his neck. His sleeves were rolled to the forearm, exposing the Roman lion and the cathedral with its olive branches and circuitry. "You look beautiful," he said when she arrived. She felt the heat rise in her cheeks and immediately resented it. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to. You look beautiful, and I want you to know I see it." She sat down. They ordered wine, and for the first time in their acquaintance they talked about nothing important at all. Childhood memories, favorite books, places they had traveled, the absurdity of Italian bureaucracy, the proper way to make carbonara. They disagreed passionately and at length. It was, Alessandra realized midway through the second course, the most pleasant evening she had spent in years. "Can I ask you something?" Severino said during dessert. "You're asking permission now? That's new." He smiled. "I'm trying to be better. You are better. Can I ask?" "Ask. Do you remember what you said in the hospital? That you weren't ready to forgive me?" "I remember. Are you ready now?" She looked at him across the candlelight, at the steel-gray eyes that had once judged her without mercy, at the hands that had placed a termination letter beside her keyboard, at the man who had spent 4 months proving, through action rather than words, that he was capable of change. "I forgave you weeks ago," she said. His eyes widened slightly. "You didn't tell me. I was waiting to see if you'd keep trying even without being told, if the effort was real, or if it was conditional on my response. And it's real." She reached across the table and took his hand. "You're real, Severino. Imperfect and stubborn and infuriating sometimes, but real." His fingers closed around hers. The Honor e Forza tattoo on his knuckles pressed gently against her skin. Honor and strength. But also, she thought, something new. Tenderness. Their first kiss happened 3 weeks later, on a terrace overlooking Lake Como. They had traveled there together to inspect the restored backup facility, professional obligation providing a convenient cover for something far more personal. The evening was warm. The lake glowed amber and rose in the fading light. The mountains stood sentinel in the distance, ancient and patient. Severino turned to her, and whatever he had been about to say died on his lips, because she was looking at him with an expression he had never seen before. Not from her, not from anyone. Complete, unguarded trust. "Alessandra." "Yes. I need you to know something." "Then tell me." "I'm in love with you." The words hung in the mountain air like notes from a distant bell. "I've been in love with you since that night in the hospital, when you told me that I was worth a second chance. Not because I'd earned it, because you chose to believe I could." "Severino, no one has ever believed in me the way you do. Not my father. Not Vittorio. Not anyone. They believed in my power, my position, my name. You believed in the man behind all of that. The flawed, prideful, sometimes cruel man who fired you without asking a single question." His voice broke slightly on the last word. "And I don't know if I deserve what you've given me, but I know that I will spend whatever time I have left trying to be worthy of it." Alessandra's eyes glistened. The evening light caught the tears she didn't bother to hide. "You already are," she said, and she kissed him, softly at first, then deeper, the kind of kiss that rewrites the story of two people's lives, that draws a line between everything that came before and everything that will come after. When they finally separated, the first stars were appearing above the lake. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've loved you since you made me pasta in a safe house near a monastery and asked me what I wanted for myself. You said you wanted to matter. You heard me." She pressed her forehead against his. "For the first time in my life, someone actually heard me." The months that followed were the happiest of both their lives. Alessandra officially rejoined the D'Aquila organization, not as a cybersecurity specialist, but as chief digital officer, with authority over the entire technological infrastructure and a seat at the leadership table. Severino restructured the organization's decision-making process to include collaborative input from all senior leaders, ensuring that no single person, including himself, could make unilateral decisions that affected people's lives. Luciana d'Aquila, Severino's elegant mother, embraced Alessandra with the warmth of a woman who had waited decades to see her son find someone worthy of his heart. "He was always too afraid to love properly," Luciana confided over tea one afternoon. Her silver hair gleamed in the sunlight, and her wise eyes sparkled with knowing. "His father was the same way. They mistake control for strength and isolation for safety. It takes a very specific kind of woman to teach them otherwise." "What kind is that?" "The kind who is strong enough to stay and wise enough to know when to leave." "You have both qualities, my dear." "How do you know?" "Because you left once. And you came back not because he asked, but because it was right." Luciana squeezed her hand. "That is the mark of a woman who loves from strength, not from need." 1 year after the night Severino d'Aquila fired Alessandra Fiorini, he stood in the operations center of the rebuilt headquarters and addressed every employee in the organization. The room was the same one where she had fought her invisible war. The workstation where she had collapsed from exhaustion still occupied its position near the windows. The monitors, all 63 of them, glowed with the calm efficiency of systems running exactly as designed. By the woman who had designed them. 1 year ago, Severino began, his deep voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I made the worst decision of my professional life. I stood in this room, looked at a woman who had been fighting for 48 hours to protect everyone in this building, and I fired her because she had finally closed her eyes." The room was absolutely silent. "I didn't ask what she had been doing. I didn't investigate. I didn't listen. I saw what I wanted to see, and I acted on assumptions that nearly destroyed everything we've built." He looked at Alessandra, who stood near the back of the room, her hazel eyes steady. Alessandra Fiorini saved this organization. She saved the financial infrastructure. She saved the intelligence archives. She saved 347 people whose lives depended on our protection. And she did all of it alone, without recognition, without support, and without anyone bothering to ask if she needed help. His voice strengthened. "That ends now. This organization will never again dismiss sacrifice because it doesn't look the way we expect. We will never again judge someone without understanding their full story. And we will never again allow the people who protect us to carry that burden alone." He extended his hand toward her. "Alessandra, would you come up here?" She walked through the crowd, acutely aware of every eye following her. When she reached him, Severino took both her hands in his. The tattoos on his knuckles, Honor e Forza, pressed against her fingers. "This woman taught me something I should have learned decades ago," he said, his steel-gray eyes never leaving hers. "True strength isn't about control. It's about trust. True honor isn't about never making mistakes. It's about owning them. And true leadership isn't about being the most powerful person in the room. It's about recognizing the power in the people around you." He released one of her hands and reached into his jacket pocket. He produced a small velvet box. The room held its collective breath. "I had planned to do this privately," he said, and for the first time his voice wavered. "But you deserve to be seen. You deserve to be valued. Publicly. Completely. Without reservation." He opened the box. Inside lay a ring, simple, elegant. A single emerald set in platinum, flanked by tiny diamonds that caught the monitor light like stars. "Alessandra Fiorini, I am asking you, in front of every person in this organization, to marry me. Not because I deserve it, but because you have taught me that love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. And I choose you, every day, for the rest of my life." The tears she had been holding back finally fell. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes." The room erupted. They married on a spring evening overlooking Lake Como, in a small ceremony surrounded by family and trusted friends. The venue was a terrace carved into the hillside above the lake, surrounded by olive trees and wildflowers. The setting sun painted the water in shades of gold and copper, and the mountains stood as witnesses to a promise that two imperfect people made to each other with perfect sincerity. Luciana sat in the front row, weeping quietly into an embroidered handkerchief. Enzo stood as best man, his scarred face softened by an emotion he would later deny experiencing. Ricardo gave Alessandra away, walking her down an aisle of scattered rose petals with the quiet pride of a man who had always known her worth. The vows were simple. Severino spoke first. I promise to listen before I judge, to ask before I assume, to trust before I control, and to value you, not just for what you do, but for who you are. Then Alessandra, I promise to let you see me, all of me, the strength and the exhaustion, the brilliance and the doubt, the courage and the fear. I promise to stop carrying the world alone. And I promise to let you carry it with me. The officiant pronounced them married. They kissed as the last light of day slipped behind the mountains and the first stars of evening emerged above the lake. And in that moment, suspended between day and night, between the past and the future, between the people they had been and the people they were becoming, two hearts that had been fighting separate wars finally found peace in each other. Later that night, as the celebration continued around them, Severino and Alessandra stood together at the edge of the terrace, looking out over the dark water. Do you remember what you said to me that night in the operations center? She asked. Which part? The part where you said people who sleep while your empire is under attack don't belong here. He closed his eyes. I remember. You were wrong about almost everything that night. But you were right about one thing. What? She turned to face him, the starlight catching the emerald on her finger. I don't belong there. She smiled. I belong here. With you. He pulled her close. The tattoo on his neck, Il controllo inizia con la fiducia, pressed against her cheek as she leaned into him. Control begins with trust. But tonight, standing beside the woman who had saved his empire and stolen his heart, Severino d'Aquila finally understood the deeper truth those words contained. Trust begins with love. And love, real love, the kind that survives misunderstanding and forgives without forgetting and grows stronger in the broken places. Love begins with the courage to stay awake, even when the whole world tells you to sleep. And somewhere in a small village in Umbria, an old man sat alone with his memories and his regrets. And for the first time in 8 years, Vittorio Sante put down the weight of his anger, looked out at the stars above the olive groves, and allowed himself to hope that somewhere, somehow, the boy he had once helped raise had finally become the man he was always meant to be. The end.